Welcome to Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO, where we've created a platform for athletes to network and connect with their fellow athletes and others. We have different types of resources on there for health, for finances, for career services. But this show is all about athletes transitioning out of sports, which has become a major issue today. They're just the challenges, whether it's mental health, financial literacy, and we interview former collegiate and professional athletes. And we talk about their transition and journey out of sports, ultimately to successful entrepreneurship or business leadership. So excited today to have Dan Lazar on. How you doing, Dan?
Hi, Rob. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. So we're taking it across the continent. Okay. So Dan is he's from Romania. I forgot where you at now.
Yeah, I'm currently based in Romania.
Still in Romania. Okay. So he was a national tennis champion in Romania growing up, and then ultimately, went to college. When he got out of college, he created his own tennis academy. So working with, giving it back to fellow tennis players. And then ultimately today, he is the CEO and founder of HeroX. And what they do is they do property development and air domes. Really cool. I was looking at it online, and we'll have Dan talk about it a little bit later. But first thing I always like to ask Dan is talk about playing sports growing up and how it shaped you leading up into college and beyond.
I feel like I'm very grateful that my parents realized how important sports are in the development of myself as a child. Tennis, in a way, was the potentially the most important puzzle piece in my development, as I feel like I developed many qualities, became more resilient, learned how to process failure, and learn how to yeah understand what were the principles that I had to learn through that failure and try to apply them in the future. So yeah, I feel like in a way, children usually have a lot of distractions, but sports is probably the most positive one that they can have. And I feel like all parents should take their kids to sports, and especially tennis. As I've done many sports, I feel like tennis is by far the one generating the most amount of impact in the lives of kids.
That's awesome. And so I guess I'm sure like over in Romania, just and you kind of just touch on it now, but there's a major focus on sports and youth sports.
Yes, however, probably the number one sport is soccer.
Okay.
So I besides tennis, I personally played water polo. I did a bit of rugby, but even a little bit of soccer. But I think tennis was the one that I liked the most, and in a way, a sport where you get to spend time with probably a higher quality or higher level of kids around you that maybe, I don't know, do less stupid things and are better at taking care of their future in a way.
Okay, great. So one of the things we focus on is ultimately the athletes transitioning out of sports, and a lot of times we talk about like in it could be various things. It could be transitioning out as a potentially a collegiate athlete or as a professional athlete. And in the U.S., I think they're starting to make a little more efforts. I think in the schools to try to have at least some type of programming towards that, whether it be like workshops or classes. Do you see any movement like when you were playing, or even now in Romania? Are there things out there like just trying to educate athletes about life after sports?
I see a little bit of a movement promoting sports within with kids, and probably a little bit more of a movement with promoting tennis within kids, as we have Simona Halep, that was the number one in number one women in tennis not too long ago, and I've actually looked at the keyword tennis and her name, and seems like she started a wave of kids being sent to tennis by their parents because they saw Simona, or kids dreaming of becoming a player like Simona in the past. Um, Processing how you move to something else after you finish your sports career, not that much. It's sort of everybody sort of tries to figure it out on their own. But there are a few good examples out there. If you're looking to do more than just sports for the rest of your life, then there's people out there that can assist you in Romania, and I think elsewhere as well.
No, that's great. It's important too, and we always encourage athletes to reach out to. I think sometimes athletes kind of get that mindset of they're the sport, So it's like Dan the tennis player, Rob the runner. It could be Bill the football player, Susie the swimmer, but they identify as a sport, and then when they're done, they're kind of like, okay, what am I going to do now? And so that's where hopefully we've talked about even as a company. This I've been working with a lot of different resource partners where they're in different spaces, whether again mental health, financial, could be career services, but just trying to put together teams of these resources to go into, whether it be universities, colleges, could be going into like in professional sports or the leagues, and just trying to make a more of an impact, not only on the current athletes, once they're done, but even the alumni athletes that tend to get forgotten.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think alumni or people that have been through this transition, assisting people that are going to the transition now is a good way of processing that chapter that is not very easy to process if you've dedicated all of your life to a sport. Doing something else is not the easiest thing. You need a little bit of encouragement and guidance, I think.
Right. And I mean, I guess in your case, you kind of, for you transitioning out of playing, but then having, having the academy was probably a good transition phase because you were kind of still involved with it, just not to the level that you were when you were playing.
Yeah, in a way that was sort of by chance. I wasn't really planning that a lot. Was I applied for some funding and I received it, and that's why I sort of started the tennis academy. When 4 years later, I ended up selling that club, which was only a six-figure exit, but still, that was an exciting result for me.
Hey, that's nice. Hey, yeah, that's a good amount. I mean, if you make six figures, I mean, I know you probably wanted more like the seven figures, but still six figures is a good number. So, let's talk about networking, connecting. It's so important today. Give me your thoughts on that, especially while you're still playing as an athlete.
I feel like, in a way, if you in a way, regardless of what challenge or desire that you have, there is people out there that can assist you in the process of, I don't know, attaining your goals and stuff like this. And um, I guess to that point, sorry, can you repeat your question?
I think it was just more just talking about the importance of networking, connecting, just getting with other people, like even when you're younger.
Yeah, there's a lot of smart people out there, and unless you go and meet with them, you can't expand your mind. So I feel like I was very lucky, a little bit through my tennis academy, and also my desire to network as much as I can, that I met a lot of really smart people through sports. So I'll tell you a small story. At some point, I was playing paddle, which is sort of a sport like tennis. I hear a conversation next to me. I just listened a little bit to the conversation. Somebody was trying to find the owner of a piece of land. That piece of land was a tennis club, and I sort of go to him and tell him, "Look, I apologies for listening to your conversation. I know who the owner is. I'm happy to introduce you to that person." I had no idea who that person was. And end up facilitating that introduction, and that person ends up being the biggest property developer in Bucharest. So that's a way in which I think sports and being in the sports environment can nurture you to do more networking, perhaps, and that can lead to building certain relationships in time.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess just something that popped in my head, but is there do you find in Romania is are people enamored by athletes in sports?
Yes, but probably not to the degree that is happening in the US. I feel like in the US, if you're a national champion or vice national champion, where you're seen like you're seen as a small hero or a leader. In Romania, not that much. Like you're still seen as a good person, but it's not that big of a deal like it is in the US.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Talk about obviously this is big with us, but talk about alumni engagement and a couple different ways. I mean, one, um, what you've seen from your school, that you went to, like, do you see alumni getting involved with each other, alumni coming back, and maybe even on the athletic front, seeing alumni athletes going back to these schools?
Um, Again, I think this movement is a lot bigger in the US with the athletic alumni assisting current players. Um, in a way, I see it more in the business environment than in an athletic environment. So I see like people that made it in business perhaps come back to a certain university and do a speech and try to assist the kids there to transition in their career if they decide to work in a business or to do a business on their own. I see that a lot more, and there's a lot of programs that assist university students in general to either become a better employee or either become a better entrepreneur through different programs.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What talk about you? I guess like you finished tennis, so I mean, as starting a tennis mechanic, you got into entrepreneurship. Talk a little bit about the athlete skill set and like the DNA, and what makes athletes good entrepreneurs or business leaders.
I'm not sure if I can speak about athletes in general, but I can speak about tennis players particularly. I feel like in Romania there's probably the players that were top 100, top 200 in the world are at least millionaires. A lot of them, with very very few exceptions. If you're looking at the top three richest people in Romania, one of them, Mr. Tsiriak, is he's a billionaire. So I feel like tennis, in a way, gives you a lot of failure, and then that allows you to build a muscle to process failure a lot easier and bring yourself up a lot faster. Then I guess being ready to adapt to anything that is thrown at you, being able to fight until the end, because you never know until you shake your opponent's hand when after you win or lose a match. You don't know you still don't know the outcome, and I feel like those are things that are very good puzzle pieces in building a business and becoming a better entrepreneur. I feel like in a way is an unfair advantage to have in business if you were a former athlete.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's we see that a lot. And I've had a bunch of people on the podcast. One guy that always comes to mind, he played college football, and then that was it afterwards. But he ultimately became a CEO of a couple really large companies, and he talked about imploring athletes. And again, back to this whole transition. A lot of times, the athletes, when they're looking at themselves as a sport, they don't see ahead. But just the things that you just talked about, there's just that whole skill set, the leadership, the perseverance, the hard work, the teamwork, everything. There's a lot of companies that want to hire that type of person. And then to your point, just as an entrepreneur, I think it's just the drive is there. I mean, they might start something else out first, but then ultimately get into like entrepreneurship. So let's talk about this is the one I mentioned offline. So I like Dan's probably like, okay, what kind of question is Rob going to ask me now? So this is something that I kind of instituted recently. But what advice would you give to freshman Dan? So look back to freshman Dan in college, what advice would you give him, knowing what you know today?
Good question. Probably have more focus. I feel like I've probably from a sense of not knowing what exactly to do. I think I've done a little bit too many things until I started to be focused. And in a way, I think focus is extremely valuable to start to compound results a lot faster. That's and that can be almost anything. Like I think up to a point I kept thinking, oh, what if this works better? What if this is better? Regardless what you choose, we will work. It's just a matter of you being as focused as you can to bring that future outcome as close to you as you can.
Okay, great. And then what about what advice would you give to senior Dan?
To senior Dan. Uh, to senior Dan. Um, I think just understand the chapter in your life that you are, and make sure you also maximize your your enjoyment of that chapter. I feel like in a way I'm a little bit of a workaholic that sometimes is so focused on what he does that forgets to also live life to the fullest. But I feel like I'm doing a little bit of a better job now having a child, that I find it a bit easier to allow myself to also enjoy.
Yeah, that children are wonderful. They definitely do that. Grandchildren, where I'm at now, that's great as well. So I could definitely see that. So let's talk about your transition out of sport. Talk a little bit about that, the journey that you had, and just you played tennis growing up. Just the levels that you hit were unbelievable. So now all of a sudden it's done. Again, you started the academy, so you're still teaching it. But what was that like going through?
So in a way, it was a little bit of an evolution. So step one, I decided to study to go to uni. I study international business. In the first year, I was part of a competition where we had to sell chocolate in the school. I won the competition, selling probably double the amount of chocolate that the second team did. Second year, I won a business plan competition, or I got second place. Third year, I attended this competition for getting funding. I got funding, and all of those experiences, even though there were really small wins, I think nurtured me or gave me more and more confidence that I can become a successful entrepreneur. And in a way, regardless if you believe that you can or you can't, I think you're right. So I think it's good to have experiences like this to give you the mindset that you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, so you just basically kind of changed the competition from tennis to business.
Yeah, it's a lot more competition, but it's all about the same things: discipline and being resilient and being driven and focused and so on.
So that kind of segues to my next question, but I mean, you probably, in a sense, answer it. But what advice would you give to athletes, like across the board? Like, it doesn't matter what sport. Like, what advice would you give them when they're done playing their sport?
Good question. I think it's everybody needs to find its own formula. But if I were to go back to me, is probably optimize your recovery better. Feel like I was doing a very good job training. I was very serious, but I was not doing the best job in hydrating myself, eating, recovering, and sleeping. And I think those four things are probably as important as what you do when you train. So if we're talking about this, and then if we were to go a step further, I think just have an open mind and just watch the things around you, the people around you. What are the people that you look up to? And if you feel like you've had enough, or you feel like you need to change your direction, ideally just go to the person that you think I don't know, maybe he's the best entrepreneur, and find a way to collaborate the person that you admire most, and find a way to collaborate with him in some shape or form. It may be that you become an employee, maybe maybe become a partner, maybe you become just another entrepreneur seeking his advice. But that's why I feel like you need to be focused on your career, but at the same time have an open mind and watch your surroundings. Don't really look for a plan B yet, but just watch and be aware of who's around you. Who could be such a who are the people that you admire that are doing other things besides sports?
Yeah, I mean, those are all those are great, man. I was talking to people like every week. I just when I listen back to these podcasts, it just the advice that you just gave and the other athletes is just great. And I think the biggest it's a teaching thing for other athletes, and that's the whole. Like I mentioned in the beginning, we're trying to teach, inspire athletes that there is life after sports. So just all you athletes out there, especially the ones that are struggling, there's help around. Just definitely reach out to people. People want to help and engage, and just the things that you just talked about, Dan, is just being open minded. And I've heard a lot about the plan B, and I think it obviously depends on what part of your career you're at. Like if you're just starting out, let's say in a freshman role in college in this sport, versus how you are as a senior, knowing that maybe your time is winding down. Your thought process can be different. But I like the whole thing you just said about being open to your surroundings. So we're going to talk now more about HeroX. So you got finished with the academy, you sold it, you said you got six figures. So now you're on to your next journey. So talk about some of the things you do. You have to take some time too, because I want people to hear the whole thing about the air domes and how they can find you and stuff like that.
Yeah, so in a way, the next step, or actually even before I sold the company, the tennis academy, I had a need of a covering solution. So my tennis club basically disappeared 6 months out of the year unless I had a covering structure. So then I was looking at what types of covering structures are out there, what I can do. My budget was limited. With what, how can I process this? And slowly but surely, I did an airdom for myself. So airdoms are the most affordable way of covering large areas. Then I sold one to a friend. Then I sold another one to another friend. And then I realized, look, actually, two airdoms are probably the revenue that my academy has in a year. So this can actually become a business. So then in this sort of infrastructure direction, I've done a number of things. I built soccer fields, the infrastructure to build them from scratch. Um, Fixed structures, air domes. I tried a lot of things, and then I realized, look, in reality, I'm the best at air domes. I feel like I make some of the best air domes in the world. They just focus on this, and that's how after doing many things, I sort of got back to just focusing on doing air domes globally. So even though we started in Romania, we expanded into Europe. We've sold our first ones in the US now. Hopefully next winter we will have a few. First one was in Rhode Island. Second one is in Michigan. And the US is starting to be more and more of my focus with air domes, just because there's a lot of inefficiency, and I feel like I can offer people a far better product that is giving them a far better return on investment.
No, that's great, and educate us on what the air domes are, like especially maybe like the differences of like yours versus some of the other structures. I know you and I talked about it a little bit, but if you can share with our audience.
Basically it's an air supported structure. So it's a membrane that you inflate, and then it keeps being inflated by air blowers, stays up, and then you typically can play any sport inside. So it protects you from rain, snow, and low temperatures, because you can also heat up the air that you push inside. So it's probably above 10,000 square feet. Probably above 10,000 square feet is by far the most affordable way of covering an area.
Okay, and I know you talked about there's like different like places for lighting and stuff like that. I forgot if I asked you, but is there air conditioning in there as well, or?
You can add both heating and AC. So yeah, depending on your needs, you can. So they can work in Canada, where they get a lot of snow, but they can also work in something like the Middle East, Bahrain, or Saudi Arabia, where they get very very high temperatures.
And so are the units inside or
The inflate. So in a way, there is four components basically. So you have the membrane, then you have the blowers that blow air in, but they are outside, and then you have the doors, and then you have certain accessories like a lightning system, maybe some sort of netting, or different kinds of anchoring systems. But those are typically the four components.
Okay, and then I know we talked to. I guess the difference too is that like some of the competitors are more they have a structure where there's not the membrane or maybe the membrane that goes over like a metal type thing or some type of like a
Yeah, so those are not called air domes; they're called fabric structures.
okay.
There's still a good use case, especially up to 10,000 square feet or up to a certain width. So if you want to do something that is 300 feet by 400 feet, they will be 10 times more expensive than an air dome would.
Okay. And I know you talked a little bit about because I asked about I asked Dan about opening doors. So talk about like the door structure, the way that has to be.
Yeah, because it's an air supported structure, typically you access in and out of the airdomes through some sort of an airlock, either a tunnel door or a revolving door that doesn't let air exit. It also has emergency doors, but with these emergency doors, you need to make sure that somebody doesn't leave a door open because slowly the air dome will deflate. So up to a point, the emergency system would start running. But if you have two or three emergency doors open, then at some point the air dome in, I don't know, half an hour will come to the ground. But
Okay.
it's not a big deal. You can just inflate it back up, so it's not um, like a car where after you have an accident it no longer works. In this case, like, it's a very resilient product, basically.
Gotcha. Okay. And then like, what's the from a perspective of because you talked about like soccer fields and tennis, football, it can be football, I guess, baseball even. Is it something then that the cities are paying for? Is that typically how it works? I guess, or is it?
Usually, it's a private endeavor. Either a rich person that wants to cover a facility, like an entrepreneur, or a tennis coach that needs to find a solution for his winter season because he doesn't have a place to play indoors, or perhaps some sort of a parks and recreation entity. But those are a small percentage of the market. In reality, a lot of them are bought by privates, country clubs, and, and club owners.
Gotcha. Have you done any pickleball air domes yet? Seems like that's
Uh,
the raging sport out there.
yeah, we just missed on the bid to do dome for the parks and recreation of Highland Park in Chicago. Somebody else won the bid, but to answer no, but we're close to closing a few sales that will be having pickleball inside.
Gotcha. That's great. So, how can people find you?
Best way would be on LinkedIn. If you search my name, Dan Lazar, then I think or HeroX, that would be the best way. Or alternatively, they can go to the website Hero Holdings or HeroX .com.au or heroxairdomes.com.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, we'll put those in the show notes and all that. But this has been great. I you can find us at alumnidirect.com, and this podcast we have it on our Alumni Direct YouTube channel. So be sure to follow as well as across all the podcast networks. But like I said, it's just the running theme each week. I love talking to all these different athletes across all sports, and it's just there's a lot of great things that can happen, when you are done with sports, and so we encourage people to watch and listen. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Facebook and all those. But again, Dan, we really appreciate your time. It was great having you today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
You're welcome.